Christian worldview. That has drastically changed over the last 250 years. What's your opinion on what we can do to restore it? Your thoughts and your support will help us fight for our kids, and we'll give you the DVD Educated for Liberty with Stephen McDowell as our thanks. Visit afa.net/educate today. afa.net/educate.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning.
Obviously, this is a major event, and in fact, in Latin America, it's looked upon as this is the equivalent of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So don't underestimate how huge this is, as Trump would say. But the thing to take away from this is that, right? The thing to take away from this is that, so to speak, as the military would say, Venezuela is the belly button of a lot of the problems that face America. And so he's addressing like 5 problems at once by doing what he did, and timing is everything. Regarding the oil, the Venezuelan government confiscated U.S. technology and oil holdings in the year 2000, and the United States didn't do anything about it. And it's to the tune of billions of dollars. It's like $20 billion in International Court of Settlements. Stated that ConocoPhillips was ripped off to the tune of billions of dollars, and Venezuela had to make restitution. Well, that was 20 years ago, and they never did. So certainly U.S. business has a lot of material and, I guess, land leases coming back to them. Now, but more important than And now the United States will have the ability to basically decide who gets the oil. Now, Trump already has said that he will not halt shipping of Venezuelan oil to China because China is quite dependent on it. Like 80% of Venezuelan oil went to China. But he's basically silently telling China, okay, look, I'll let you have the oil until you start making trouble, then you're not getting the oil. And this is very, very important because basically you're not going to see an invasion of Taiwan if China doesn't have access to the oil. So Trump may very well have postponed or stopped a future war with China invading Taiwan because more important than us having the oil, he's making sure that China maybe doesn't have the oil. So right there, that is extremely important in and of itself.
Yeah, it really is. And I think with the focus being so much on Venezuela, who's going to uh, come in and be the next president, and how that regime change will happen, and some of those questions, it's really been a narrow focus in the media just on Venezuela, not so much the ripple effect of this operation and U.S. relations with China, as you mentioned, and even Russia, Iran, or Cuba. I mean, all of them as well have ties to the Maduro government. I mean, so how does this affect even broader than China?
Right, because basically under Maduro, the place was a criminal command center for corruption, for narco-terrorism, for foreign intel operations, everything. And now that has been removed. Cuba, obviously, is very important, an enemy of the United States since 1962, before I was even born. And now, because they are dependent totally on Venezuelan oil for to keep the communist illusion going for the last 25 years, they could collapse almost under their own weight in less than a year. Now, if Trump pushes them, it'll happen even faster, or Rubio, who is a Cuban American, by the way. So Cuba is obviously extremely important, and Iran is also very important. So now possibly China is looking at a 1-2 punch with Venezuela eliminated as an oil source, definitely, and potentially Iran with the demonstrations that are currently going on in Iran. Russia is also there too. So basically, it's like if you went to a bar in Caracas, it would be like going to the Star Wars bar. You'd have Chinese advisors, you'd have Russian military advisors, you'd have Iranians running around, you'd have members of Hezbollah running around. Another thing that used to happen, and this is very significant from an intel viewpoint, is there were Iranian terrorists, Hezbollah, etc., going to Venezuela, and they were being issued Venezuelan passports, genuine Venezuelan passports, by their government. So these operatives could be throughout the United States, because thanks to Uncle Joe letting people in the last several years. So all of these things are devastating. But another thing that is very important, and I think refers to the timing of this incident, is Venezuela's involvement with the Smartmatic voting system. It was Venezuela, along with other people, that created the voting system that enabled Maduro to steal the elections 2 years ago, even though he only got 25% of the vote. Smartmatic was bought by another company which ran the U.S. election software. Now, this is coming out, but it's coming out slower than the other things I've described. And so why is this important? This is highly important. But, oh, by the way, and yesterday on Truth Social and stuff, Trump was putting out all kinds of things about the 2020 election fraud, because Maduro is likely to, when he's in his trial, to describe the corruption that is present in the United States. How many senators have been getting payoffs from Venezuela? How many Iranian terrorists have been let in? And how the Smartmatic voting system was incorporated into the United States. This is very important in Trump's build-up to making major moves in 2026 against the deep state.
Wow. And do you think that the process, and I recognize, that, and we have another lawyer, coming on after this that may be able to answer this question better, but just in terms of the process and how long this takes, I mean, if we're looking at getting some of those answers from Maduro before the 2026 election, I mean, is there time to do that, or do you think this is more looking forward to 2028?
I think that there is time to do this. I certainly think that it is, and the lawyer can answer that better from a legal point. But I think that this is all. It is certainly part of Trump's strategy to do this before the midterms, to get this done. And so I think that is part of it. Somebody even said yesterday, and it made a great deal of sense, that a lot of the takedowns of gang members and stuff like that within the country in the United States were actually terrorist cells that have now been eliminated because they knew they were going to be going into Venezuela, and they wanted to avoid any kind of retaliation within the United States. So that is certainly possible, and as an intel officer, I keep an open mind. But basically, I think by doing this, Trump has thrown a lot of the bad people in the world into chaos. The Chinese are enraged by this stuff. And, I love seeing Chinese communists rolling on the carpet, pulling their hair out. I'm sure you do too. So this is fantastic stuff. And it's hard to believe that we're the same country that just had a humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan only 2 years ago. And so
what a
now
difference.
the United States is right.
What a difference a president
and now that we're back, this makes the possibility of war anywhere in the world, certainly directed against the United States, much less likely, because we have done things that no other world power can even think about doing. Chinese and Russian radars and missiles were proven to be absolutely useless in Caracas. And Russia and China have shown themselves to be the worst allies possible. They do nothing to help people. And you don't think that's a message that resounds in the presidencies of hundreds of countries around the world, that the Russians and Chinese talk a big game, but they do nothing when the United States is involved. So either you ally yourself with the United States or you're looking at some hard times in your future.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating how just this one action and kind of tip of the spear, and obviously, there were actions that led up to this, then have so many different ripple effects between, our relations with other nations, other things going on in the United States. I see this as a large part of President Trump's goal as well in the Trump mandate of his election in 2024 to do kind of the mass deportations. Speaking of Tren de Aragua and getting a lot of these Venezuelans that came in, perhaps under some kind of amnesty or refugee status, to actually go back home and have some of those deportations. Right. And yet, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem was on the news, I think it was Fox, yesterday, saying that that some of these Venezuelans could reapply for status, and it didn't seem like she was that eager to make the point that a lot of these people should be going back home, especially now that the refugee status is not really in effect based on Maduro.
Right. And so, but that is something that will happen. See, so there's another genius stroke is that this will encourage, there will be certainly some Venezuelans who will definitely go home, as there are Cuban Americans who will be going if Cuba winds up falling apart this year, which I think is quite possible. So basically, Trump is trying to set up a much more stable South America. And by doing so, that reduces the pressure for immigration into the United States. Rather than just close the border, it also reduced the desire of people to want to go to the United States because you're improving their countries. And so by right now, President Trump is working with the present vice president of Venezuela. Now, we'll see where that goes. But he is also smart enough to understand that the de-Baathification of Iraq was a disaster. You can't just send every bureaucrat home and every soldier home and expect the country to continue. Iraq collapsed because of that. And so right now he is working with members of the Maduro regime who quite understand that if they don't toe the line, they're probably going to be going to prison or worse. So they have a real incentive to do what they're told and stabilize the country and set it up for future elections so that when the elections come, the transition will be very natural and will not have any of the chaos that was a feature of the invasion of Iraq.
Wow, so much more we could go into. We've got to take a break here, Scott Eulinger. I always so appreciate your analysis and your perspective, because I think a lot of this really isn't analysis that you're hearing on mainstream. Certainly, of course, from some of the leftist media outlets who are just, screaming over, the U.S. Constitution and not really understanding exactly what's going on here. But we're going to get into all of that, and also the trial that's coming up for Maduro when we come right back here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
My debt problem started probably about 2016. I needed my life to change financially. I called Trinity and I ended up joining based on high credit card bills and high interest rate. And my counselor at Trinity has been great, and Trinity has been helping me to get on the right path of paying off these credit card bills, bringing down the interest rate. They have consolidated my bills into one low monthly payment. And now I am finally...
Decent man. Not sure he understands what decency means in America, since he wasn't even speaking English. But Fox News reports that Maduro, the dethroned Venezuelan dictator, indicted on major drug trafficking and weapons charges in the United States, arrived in a federal court in New York at noon Monday for his arraignment, days after American forces captured him in his own presidential palace. As U.S. Marshals escorted him into the courtroom, he greeted members of the press and the public in the gallery by saying Happy New Year in Spanish. Minutes into the proceeding, the judge cut him off when he claimed he had been kidnapped. The judge had asked him to confirm his full name. He replied, I am Nicolas Maduro Moros, through a translator, and he said, President of Venezuela, I am here kidnapped, and I am here since January 3rd, Saturday. I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela. The judge then cut him off, said the hearing was not the proper time for Maduro to protest his arrest, and moments later, the judge asked him to enter a plea, and he said, I am innocent. I am not guilty. I am a decent man. I am still the president of my country. But that indictment has been pending since the first Trump administration, and then U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr had some commentary on that indictment that he oversaw at the Trump DOJ on Fox News Sunday. Here's what he had to say.
I have a high degree of confidence.
All right, well, let's welcome in Gerard Folletti, who is a senior counsel at the Lawfare Project. And Gerard, so, this is in New York, and so there is some speculation online already that not all charges will be a guilty verdict just because of the demographic there. Governor Ron DeSantis of my home state of Florida has indicated there may be charges forthcoming for Maduro in Miami, which I think is very fascinating. But what's your perspective overall on at least the initial indictment?
I think the initial indictment is very strong, and it lays out a very good case against Maduro as the head of a drug cartel rather than the elected president of a country, which he is not. The United States and the European Union and many countries don't recognize his leadership as legitimate. The indictment is very thorough and comprehensive in laying out the activities that justify a conviction. So I think that as it stands right now, he has a hard task to basically counter the government's evidence that will be put forth during trial to disprove the case that the government is alleging.
And do you know why this was brought specifically in a New York federal court?
Well, I think the main reason you bring it into New York federal court is two reasons. One is that it is a place that has jurisdiction. A lot of the financial transactions that are U.S. dollar denominated go through banks in New York, and that gives the SDNY jurisdiction. But the other reason is also that New York does have very good judges in the Southern District and Eastern District who have dealt with high-profile cases, international cases, cases of international law as well that come up. So you have both a confluence of there is proper jurisdiction, but you also have really good judges.
Yeah, and hopefully that's the case of really good judges to make sure that the process goes the way that it should. And our prior guest in the first segment, who is a former CIA intelligence officer, was suggesting that the timeline of this could end up having the DOJ end up with some statements from Maduro on some of his alleged crimes even before the 2026 election, and President Trump may be looking to that to perhaps have some kind of election integrity measures, and some other things overall with some of information Maduro may provide. In your mind, do you think that that is too quick of a timeline, or how should we anticipate this process to unfold?
Well, I think that in the Southern District, ironically, criminal cases do tend to move fairly quickly. I think that we are likely to see this progress into the discovery phase by summer, and we might even get to trial this year, at the end of this year. Now, that doesn't take into account appeals and other issues that will come along the way. I know that Maduro's team is anticipating making motions to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction, claiming that he has sovereign immunity as the leader of a country and that he was forcibly abducted. I don't think those motions will go anywhere, but they need time to play out. I do think that we will be at a point where we will have a verdict likely by the election in 2026.
Yeah, wow. That would be incredible. And what would a guilty verdict imply, at least in terms of the presidency of Venezuela and how that regime change is likely to occur? I mean, is that a totally separate question? And, regardless of what happens with the trial, that's going to proceed, or how do those things work in tandem?
When you're overwhelmed by social media, food, relationships, shopping, do you reach for alcohol? On the next Focus on the Family, you'll hear Christy Osborne's powerful story of turning from daily drinking to finding freedom in Christ. She discovered strength in God's Word and will share the peace she found with you. Next time on Focus on the Family with Jim Daly.
Focus on the Family is heard each weekday morning at 5 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins takes you behind the headlines and sound bites into conversations with leaders and newsmakers. And Washington Watch Weekend Edition features content from the best segments of the week. For many years, Washington Watch has provided in-depth news coverage and insightful analysis from a Christian perspective. And Washington Watch Weekend Edition is a condensed version of the week's coverage. Washington Watch Weekend Edition, now at 5:30 p.m. Central Saturdays on American Family Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, and I hope you're looking forward to a wonderful 2026. Let me tell you about a couple of things you might be interested in that we're going to go on. Those are tours. We call them spiritual heritage tours. We're going this year in June and September to Washington, D.C. and George Washington's Mount Vernon. We're also going to Colonial Williamsburg and the historic Jamestown settlement. Then we're going also to Boston, Massachusetts. So all those tours are coming up in 2026. The D.C. and Williamsburg trip are both in June and September, so pick the month you want to go. The Boston trip is in September. So, for all the information, the itinerary, the cost, everything you need to know about these tours, if you want to join us on a vacation with a purpose, that's what we call it, go to wildmangroup.com. WILDMON group.com is the website. Find out all the information, and we'll see you on one of our 2026 tours.
Hi, I'm Doug Chamberlain, host of Family Health Checkup. For over 30 years, Samaritan members have come together to share medical costs and lift each other up in prayer. Now, I'm excited to tell you about Redeem Health Share Ministry, Samaritan's next generation of healthcare sharing. Redeem offers affordable, flexible programs that reflect your values and help you manage medical costs with confidence. Each month, members contribute a share amount to help pay each other's medical bills, and you choose the providers and treatments that are right for your family. It's not insurance, it's a community of believers supporting one another through life's health challenges. So, whether it's a routine visit or a sudden emergency, there's a caring Christian community walking with you every step of the way. Redeem Health Share. It's more than healthcare. It's hope. It's healing. It's faith in action. Call 1-844-REDEEM-0 today. Join the movement. Share joyfully. Live redeemed.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, there is a
really shocked or surprised to find out that there is corruption in one of the bluest states in the country, and it's a total failure. It's a failure going all the way to the governor's office. It's a failure at the state level. It's a failure at the local level. Mass corruption, billions of dollars that were fraudulently stolen from taxpayers, going towards resettlement, refugee programs, all kinds of things where people were using those benefits to operate daycare centers, food pantries that were non-existent. You also look at the fact that Walz' own policy when it comes to climate change, when it comes to the LGBTQ cartel, trying to make it a safe harbor state for those who want to get a sex change operation under the age of 18. They could have a court-appointed, custodian to take care of kids and essentially, trans a child from being a boy to being a girl. This was all happening in Minnesota. This was all happening under Tim Walz' watch. And as I was hearing you just before coming on, I couldn't agree more that in the 2024 election cycle, so much of this was exposed. If you went on social media, if you were listening to the talking points of conservative pundits, you heard a lot about this. But in the mainstream, the legacy media, you heard nothing, absolutely crickets about this. Walz was supposed to be the balance to the extremism of Kamala Harris. Walz was supposed to be the one that was going to be reaching in the Rust Belt towards men, masculinity, and to be some kind of balance. But he's extreme. He's even more extreme than Kamala is, and that's a surprise. That's kind of a shock. And lest we forget, it was St. Paul, Minneapolis, where essentially the Floyd riots started. So they were the hotbed. This is in a very, very blue state with very progressive policies, cashless bail, all kinds of things that are soft on crime policies, and yet that was the place where BLM started. That was the place where cities started to burn back in 2020 during COVID. That was all under Tim Walz' watch. Sadly, and I agree with you, we need accountability. It's great to expose these things, but people need to go to jail, and so we'll see if Republicans have the will, if Republicans have the nerve to prosecute these cases.
Yeah, and wow, that's a really important kind of flashback to the history of this, not just looking at kind of this moment in time, but, going all the way back to 2020 and even, further on than that to see how all of these headlines kind of play into each other. But Ryan, why do you think it is that the mainstream media, at least on the more conservative side, wasn't really covering this during the 2024 election? Because it seems like that would have been a lot more helpful to President Trump. And you would think that investigative journalists, other than, kind of just the independents, would have been more interested in this story during the 2024 cycle.
I think, and this is going back 2024, even 2020 and before that, I think that much has changed in how legacy news reports media. And even with many of these conservative websites, they will put out opinion articles. A lot of those are curated in such a way, the content is curated in such a way that it is surface level information. It is the kind of information that is shared among left-wing news, right-wing news, but very few people do classic journalism anymore. Very few people actually do investigatory reporting. They don't get to, the local level. They don't put boots on the ground. They're not interviewing local citizens. They're not finding out or digging for information. So a lot of times what you see is a cursory glance, a cursory look at what's happening at the national level, and most people are sharing the same talking points. And so this was kind of a rare look, and I'm hoping to see more of this. I think it's not just happening in blue states. Sadly, it's also happening in red states. There's information even coming out of Texas that there is fraud being committed, H-1B visas, as well as Indian-owned gas stations, that there are all kinds of programs that are being utilized, tax benefits and whatnot, that are being utilized to start up businesses, and you have a leg up if you are a foreign national who has received a visa and you're immigrating to the United States. You have a leg up versus naturalized citizens. They don't have the same benefits. They can't draw from the same pool. Much of this will be exposed, I think, moving forward because, Jenna, we have eyes wide open now. And it's not just in blue states. It's happening in red states as well. But to your point, I think it's because classic journalism is dead. People are, a lot of times people are sitting in their chair somewhere connected to the internet, and they're just scouring headlines at a surface level. Very few people are actually getting into where the real news is being created or made, and they're not asking difficult questions. They're not interviewing people on the ground.
Yeah, and that's such a great point because so much of the curated content that everybody is talking about comes from a couple of sets of, legacy media and their headlines that they choose to put out. And so that's why we need a lot of these independent investigators. And this is why the proliferation of online social media, for all of its other drawbacks, one of the best benefits is so that these types of things can go viral and actually change the news cycle and sort of force the legacy media to actually pay attention to what they should be, instead of just being able to curate that content and say, these are the only set of items that, everybody can talk about. But also to your point, Ryan Helfenbein, there is so much fraud going on in so many different levels of government benefits. You mentioned a few. I just got another headline this morning that a former Georgia state rep was indicted yesterday on one count of making a false statement in connection with an application for federal unemployment benefits during COVID-19. We've seen so many instances of, fraudulent SBA loans. All of this then just feeds back into the point of what, Gen Z and I think some of the young people are frustrated about with how much they're paying in taxes, can't get ahead. And then yet they see, all of this fraud occurring. And if our government does nothing about it, if Republicans, while they are in control, don't actually force accountability, that is a huge signal to the younger generation. We don't care about ensuring that you are put on the best path toward fulfilling your American dream. We'd rather just basically steal it from you and hand it to someone else. And I think that is a huge issue that is on the line for 2026 and also 2028.
I think you point to the most important thing that corruption ultimately engenders in the next generation, and that is, this Robin Hood mentality. I forget the name, but the guy that is on trial for murder in the state of New York City, who murdered the head of an insurance company. That is a perfect example. Many people on social media sympathizes with him. Young people across the nation are looking to our institutions and they're saying, hey, they're so utterly corrupt. I'm paying exorbitant taxes anyway. And by the way, a lot of this is a socialist-style redistribution on these smaller things. Why not do it on a grander scale? I want the government to solve my affordability crisis. I want rent controls where I live, not just in New York City, but elsewhere. And this is a huge problem. This is a problem with the Gen Z generation. And when honor is missing, I'm reminded of the C.S. Lewis quote, about geldings that don't produce hollow-chested men without honor, men without loyalty. We've robbed that next generation with a sense of duty, with pride, and with expectation. A lot of them are looking to these institutions, legacy institutions that are federal government, state governments, and they're saying, wow, why not me? If these guys can get all of these goodies and these freebies, why not me? We're going to have a huge problem on our hands when it comes to socialism. And we could lose this argument with the next generation. Not that socialism works. We know it fails. But when they see so much corruption with the existing system, that becomes the water in the dam that ultimately breaks. And that's what we need to be concerned about. And why I think it is so important that these cases be prosecuted, that they be tried, that people are brought to justice, and people are put in jail. Because just like we treated the Venezuela dictator just a couple of days ago, if we allow for these things to happen, it seeds more destruction, more chaos down the road, and we could lose the very country that we're trying to preserve and keep.
Yeah, and that's a really fascinating point, Ryan, that, when young people see this type of corruption, the tendency is, well, if they're getting free handouts, why not me as well? What are you doing for me? And we're seeing some rise of a kind of demand for a little more of the socialist kind of economic model. Thankfully, there is a huge segment on the right that, saying no to that, and that's a very good thing. But why do you think it is that the demand, when there's fraud like that and young people see that, why is the reaction, well, give me the benefit too, instead of stop the fraud, let me keep more of my hard-earned money and make them go work as hard as I'm having to work?
It's interesting. I do think this is if you can't beat them, join them. But there's an aspect of that. But I will say this, and this is why it's so important. Faith is an element here. And I think as you have, again, we have pockets of revival. We have signs that our nation is coming back when it comes to religiosity, when it comes to the non-affiliated and those who didn't grow up in church. I think it's something like 34% of Gen Z have not attended a church service anywhere at any time in their life. They're the most non-religious generation. And yet we're seeing through Pew Research, through Bible sales, through a number of outlets that have been reporting on this, that faith is making a comeback. That's wonderful. But still, by every measure, the Gen Z generation is the most non-religious. That leads to a kind of nihilistic worldview. A worldview without God, without a sense of ultimate justice, without a sense of ultimate right and wrong, black and white, stark differences, contrasts. When you live in the gray, when you live in the societal expectation that there is no ultimate right or wrong, there is no God to be accountable to, people just treat the world like it's a mass Grand Theft Auto kind of game. And at the end of the day, they just do whatever pleases them. This kind of reminds me of Judges. There is no king in Israel. Everyone does what is right in their own eyes. You've written tons on constitutional theory and history, Jenna. We know that self-governance ultimately begins with a moral and religious people. A well-ordered society is not one that is centralized with government control. A well-ordered society is based on self-governance and the fear of God. And so I think what is missing is the fear of God in this next generation. That is why so many of them are saying, I'm disillusioned. I see corruption at every corner. If everyone else is looting and pillaging and stealing, so to speak, why not me? Because there is no fear of God. And we need to get back to that in the country. And I think that, again, goes back to reasserting justice. And then also, at the same time, the church doing what it does best. We need to proselytize this country. We need to get back to our biblical roots. We need revival. We need reform.
So well said. I could not agree more, Ryan Helfenbein. And we just have a couple of minutes left, but this goes into the legacy of Charlie Kirk and the revival that we saw spark in September of last year. And where do you think that all of this for the next generation is headed in terms of seeking God and where the church should be focused for 2026?
I'm so glad you went back to our friend Charlie. I know he was a friend of yours, friend of mine. We miss Charlie. What happened on September 10th was very real. It was horrific. Tragedy that we all witnessed. What happened on September 21st was equally real. We saw in that memorial service Christ glorified. He was praised. He was preached. And he was even, the name of Jesus was spoken, Jenna, by some that I don't think have bent the knee to Christ. I don't think that ultimately know Jesus. So I don't think everybody from that platform knows who Jesus Christ is personally. But let me say this. It goes right back to the pages of Scripture that one day every knee will bow, tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. And that includes those who are heaven-bound and those who are unrepentant, have not turned from their sins, and they are on the fast track to hell. Every single person one day will bend the knee to Jesus. Here's the thing. I am very hopeful that this next generation, and there are many who are waking up to the realities that their evil does exist. And if evil exists in this world, what we saw with Tyler Robinson's taking of Charlie's life, the alleged shooter, if that is evil incarnate, we also saw goodness. We saw the goodness of God. We saw it exhibited in people like Charlie Kirk and also in Frank Turek and Mikey McCoy and many others. There's a distraction happening right now in the conservative movement with these various social media influencers who are sowing seeds of deceit and vision and destruction. We need to ultimately bring it back to Christ.
To truth. Thanks so much, Ryan. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast